Good evening. I call the June 4th, 2020 meeting of the Johnson City Board of Commissioners to order. We are meeting again electronically. We do have a pretty good storm rolling through here right now, so hopefully we will keep our connections, all of us. This evening, we have Pastor Jason Royston from the Boones Creek Baptist Church with us electronically to deliver our invocation. Following that, we will have the pledge. Pastor?
Thank you, Mayor. We are so thankful to be with you tonight, and really different. And I don't know how many meetings have you had like this, Mayor?
Maybe 6.
Okay.
I'm just guessing.
Right. Well, it is moving along. We've been in parking lot service mode for like 6 or 7 weeks, and so I know we'll all be glad to get back to some kind of normal meeting, but thank you for asking me. And I just want to say that we're praying for our city leaders at the church. We've been praying for our state leaders. You know, the book of Timothy tells us this. In 2 Timothy, it says, 1 Timothy 2, it just says for us to pray for leaders and those who are in authority, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life. And I think about our country, and I think about our city. Wow, we need peace. We need peace. And so pray for you all for wisdom. I know many of the things that you decide tonight may not affect, you know, our nation or our city as far as peace, but your title, your walk, who you are, your role affects our city. And so praying for you. And, you know, one of the passages of scripture that we read at Christmas time in Isaiah, it just talks about Jesus being the Prince of Peace. And boy, I tell you what, it would be a blessing if our cities and our country would have peace tonight. And so let me pray for wisdom for you. Thank you for inviting me. I hope blessings on your meeting tonight. And I hope our town, our city can have peace, and thankful for your leadership. And if there's anything I can ever do for any of you, just please let me know. Let's pray. Father, tonight we're grateful that you've allowed us to have a moment, and God, just to come and share our heart. And God, thank you for your peace in our life. And God, we ask, God, that you reign in our life, and for you to control, and God, for us to submit to that. Father, we are asking for peace on our city and our town, our country, community. Father, I thank you for these leaders and how they represent the city and how the things they do. We're grateful for them. God, we ask your wisdom to be among them and among this meeting. God, we ask for them to be blessed, and God, for you to give favor to them. Father, I ask, God, that our community would submit to the governing authorities, and God, and our governing authorities would act in a peaceful mode. And God, in our country can heal. God, we need peace tonight. I thank you that your Son is the Prince of Peace. Father, I pray that he rules and reigns in our hearts, and that, God, that we would submit to that. Thank you, God, again for your love and grace on our life. In Christ's name, amen. Amen. Thank you, City.
Thank you, Pastor. We appreciate you coming tonight.
You're welcome.
We'll now have the pledge. I think there'll be a flag on the screen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Ms. Jennings, as a part of the requirements of having an electronic meeting, we need an official roll call of the commissioners present.
Okay, Commissioner Calhoun.
Present.
Commissioner Fowler.
Here.
Commissioner Hunter.
Here.
Vice Mayor Wise is absent. Mayor Brock.
Present. Thank you. Mr. Peterson, we'll turn it over to you. You're on mute, Pete.
Is that better?
Much better.
I apologize. Your first order of business is consideration of the minutes from your regularly scheduled meeting held on Thursday, May the 21st.
Commissioners, is there a motion?
Move approval.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second. Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, Ms. Jennings?
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter, can you hear me, Commissioner Hunter?
He's on mute.
Mayor Brock,
Yes.
he's driving, so,
Okay, all
No,
right, yeah.
I'm here now.
okay, you want to vote?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
thank
I
you.
think I lost connection for a second.
I figured. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Your next order of business is presentation of a proclamation recognizing Men's Health Month.
Okay, this is a lengthy proclamation tonight. I would offer up, Dr. Fowler, you being a physician, and this is about men's health, would you like to make the presentation of this proclamation? You can find it on your agenda.
If I can get it to pull up here, I will be happy to do that.
All right. If not, we'll go for it.
I'm having trouble with getting both of these computers going at the same time, but
All right. If
it may take a minute. You may want to go ahead.
Okay, I will certainly go ahead. Whereas despite advances in medical technology and research, men continue to live an average of 5 years less than women, with Native American and African American men having the lowest life expectancy. And whereas educating the public and health care providers about the importance of a healthy lifestyle and early detection of mental health problems will result in reducing rates of mortality from diseases. And whereas men who are educated about the value of preventive health can play in prolonging their lifespan, and their role as productive family members will be more likely to participate in health screenings. And whereas fathers who maintain a healthy lifestyle are role models for their children and have happier, healthier children. And whereas Men's Health Network worked with Congress to develop a national men's health awareness period as a special campaign to help educate men, boys, and their families about the importance of positive health attitudes and preventive health practices. And whereas the Men's Health Month website has been established at www.menhealthmonth.org and features resources, proclamations, and information about awareness events and activities, including Wear Blue for Men's Health. And whereas Johnson City Men's Health Month will focus on a broad range of men's health issues, including heart disease, mental health, diabetes, prostate and testicular and colon cancer. And whereas the citizens of this city are encouraged to increase awareness of the importance of a healthy lifestyle, regular exercise, and medical checkups. Now, therefore, I, Jenny L. Brock, Mayor of the City of Johnson City, do hereby proclaim the month of June 2020 as Men's Health Month in Johnson City, Tennessee, and encourage all citizens to pursue preventive health practices and early detection efforts. Dr. Fowler, do you have any follow-up comments that you'd like to make, encouraging men to be a little more proactive? I know my husband sometimes can be a little hard-headed about going to visit his doctor, but maybe you've got some magic words we can use to encourage men to be more preventive.
Men usually get drug into my office to see me by their wives, so I have a hard time really getting them to come to see me. So I'm not sure I have a whole lot more to say other than we need to take better care of ourselves.
Right, for sure. All right, well, thank you so much. Okay, Mr. Peterson, our next item.
The next order of business is consideration of the consent agenda.
Commissioners, are there any items you would like pulled for further discussion?
No, ma'am.
All right. Commissioner Hunter, is there anything you
think
would
I
like to
got-
pull?
Go ahead, Todd.
I was just going to say, I think I got all of my questions answered earlier, so I am good.
Very good. Commissioner Hunter, did you have anything?
I don't really necessarily have anything to pull, but I am excited to see the lease and the installation of the cell phone tower, which will help provide better cell phone service around the med center. I'm excited about that.
Okay, did you want some discussion on that? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear everything you were
No.
saying. Okay,
No.
just a comment. Okay, very good. All right, and I have nothing to pull. Is there a motion to pass the consent agenda?
Move for approval?
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any other discussion? Ms. Jennings?
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter,
Yes.
Mayor Brock.
Yes.
All right, your next order of business will be consideration of ordinances, beginning with ordinance number 4738-20. An ordinance to amend Article 2, definition of terms used in the code, Article 3, nonconforming provisions, Article 4, application of regulations, Section 4.7, yards and setbacks, and Section 4.13, accessory structures and uses, and Article 6, use requirements by district in the City of Johnson City zoning ordinance. This is ready for your consideration on first reading, and I would like to ask Mr. Mitchell if he would explain the ordinance, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Before I begin, first of all, I have a presentation to give you because we realize that there's a tremendous amount of information that needs to be processed with this, and so we've got some graphics to help with that. But I wanted to address one quick thing. Right as I was logging on tonight, I heard you all talking a little bit about boat docks. So I wanted to provide some clarification if I could, and I don't want to make presumptions about what the question that was asked, but this ordinance, this version does have the boat dock exemption already built into it. So I wanted to make sure that folks were aware of that because we were able to get that back before Planning Commission. So this does exempt boat docks. We are leaving boat docks up to regulation by the state, by TVA. And so we think that that's best for those. So all other structures on the property would be deemed accessory structures. So Wendy, I'm going to share my screen now, if that's okay. I've got my presentation already pulled up here. So we'll go ahead and get started on this. As the city manager had mentioned, we're going to be talking about several things tonight, but largely accessory structures, lots, and nonconformities. So let's look. I need to move a couple of things around on my screen here so that I can talk to you. Let's look at the sections that are under consideration for this text amendment. Number one, we're going to do some definition cleanup as part of this. Also clarifying rear setbacks for irregular lots. There was a specific question that the city manager had on this, and so I have a slide to address his question on this. Bullets 3 and 4 are really the bulk of this conversation, and that's where really most of the questions have come. That is clarifying yard areas and setbacks on corner lots and alleys. We know alleys this is a new thing here that we're talking about or that we're considering. And then making accessory structure standards scalable. This is something new too, is wanting to move away from fixed numbers, fixed caps, and have accessory structure standards scalable to the area, scalable to the house, so that you can allow for a little bit more and a larger or estate size lot, whereas you can still accommodate accessory structures on your smaller urban lots. While I'm on that, if you look at the bottom of the screen there, one of the barometers for having a conversation, having a policy conversation about changing your ordinance is the Board of Zoning Appeals caseload. And so you'll see here that Mr. Manley has done a great job in putting together some data that shows that over time, the total number of BZA meetings has dropped. And that's actually a good thing. It speaks well for the code. But you can see, though, at the same time, even though our total number of BZA case meetings have dropped, or BZA meetings have dropped, that the percentage of the caseload that deals with accessory structures has increased. So what that tells us is that it's time to have a conversation about accessory structures. So moving on, we will also talk a little bit about clarifying temporary uses and then clarifying non-conforming uses versus structures. We also do have one repeal built into this, and that is a provision that's inconsistent with state law. And that's something we got clarified through the legal department with Ms. Sandos, where our code currently allows somebody to go in front of the BZA and ask for a special exception to go from one non-conforming use to another non-conforming use. And you can't do that. That's called a use variance. If you have a situation like that, you just need to ask for a rezoning. So let's dive into it. One of the first questions that the Vice Mayor asked on Monday as part of our preliminary conversation was what is this about no setbacks on alleys for accessory structures, and what kind of impact is that going to have on our neighborhoods? Where are all these neighborhoods that have improved alleys? So what these two maps show you are just that, are our neighborhoods that have improved alleys. And you'll see on the left-hand side of the screen there, the bulk of these neighborhoods are really clustered around downtown. This is our older, more urbanized area. You'll see there on the far northeast corner with Carnegie in that area, and Fairview jumping over 26 into the Welborn area, and East 8th wrapping around to Mountain Home and Tree Streets. So that's really it. We do have one outlier, and that is Park Place subdivision, which is up off Carroll Creek Road right next to the lake. So outside of those areas, we do not have other areas with improved alleys. And so this is where this will have the most impact. And the proposal is to have no rear setback on an alley. And I'll show you a graphic on a further slide to better describe. The rear setback question on irregular lots, this was one of the questions that the city manager asked me about this particular diagram. I do want to clarify that this proposal or this diagram is not showing that the rear setback for irregular lots would drop to 10 feet. That is not the case. That where you actually make the measurement is from that 10-foot mark. So what we've done there is clarify on these odd shaped lots where you need to make that mark, and then you draw your rear setback from that. So let's dive into the accessory structures. I've got on the screen here two slides of accessory structures, and then I'll have on the next examples of accessory buildings. You can see here, these are just perfect examples of accessory structures, everything from a gazebo to the pool house, that actually being more of a kind of a pool shed or a pole barn for the pool side there. And then the pool itself is deemed an accessory structure. Moving on, you'll see these are examples of buildings. On the left is a good example of a smaller shed that could be everything from a garden shed to a dressed up mower shed, but a variety of things, a playhouse for the children. And then on the right, a little bit larger structure that can serve as an accessory office for a home occupation or a detached den, et cetera, et cetera. But I do want to clarify that at this time, our ordinance does not allow accessory dwelling units. So at no point would we issue permits or allow accessory dwelling units, meaning a detached, fully complete, independent dwelling unit. That is not permitted right now, but that's a conversation that we believe we might have in the future. So let's start with this conversation talking about accessory structure height. This is something that there's been some question on this leading up to tonight's meeting. So I want to jump on this first. Right now, across the board, our ordinance requires or has a 15-foot cap on all accessory structures. What that does is that 15-foot cap does not take into consideration the size of the lot, the zoning, the character of the area. So it is not scalable. What we're proposing is that the overall height of the accessory structure be scalable to the lot and or to the house. So you'll see here on the mid to right-hand side of the screen, this is a diagram showing how we in our ordinance here in Johnson City define height, building height. So you'll see starting over here on the left-hand side, flat roof extends from the finished grade up to the top of the flat roof. And then as you get into pitched roofs with a hip roof, gabled roof, shed roof, those are all measured to the midpoint. So we do not allow or we do not measure when you're looking at building height to the peak, it's to the midpoint. And then the last one is a mansard. Those are rare. That's a French design, and that's measured to the deck line. So what we're proposing with these changes is to allow the accessory structure height to reach but not exceed the allowed maximum height that of the principal structure as it's defined by the ordinance. So if the principal structure is a flat roof, your accessory structure could not exceed the height of the principal structure's flat roof. If your principal structure is a hip roof or a gabled roof, your accessory structure could not exceed that midpoint. So do want to clarify that. And I've got a couple examples on the next slide. So on the left is an example of a no-no you can't do. And on the example on the right is gives an example of how this can work. So neither of these photographs are from Johnson City. So you'll see here on the left, this is an example where the accessory structure far exceeds the height of the principal structure. And that is just poor design. So we are avoiding that with this provision. On the right, now both of these structures are quite tall. This is an image from Chicago, but it just gives you an idea of how you can even have a multi-story accessory structure and still have that fall below the midpoint of the principal structure. So that's what our proposal brings forth. So now let's look at the yard area and the location of accessory structures. On the left-hand side of the screen is a diagram of a typical interior lot, meaning it's not on the corner. So you'll see here in the yellow is the front yard, in the back is the blue is the rear yard. And so what we've done here is using just simple red X's and green check marks, identified where accessory structures can be located in the side and rear based on these this ordinance proposal. So I'll go in a clockwise manner, starting here on the left, I guess at about the 9 o'clock position. An accessory structure would not be allowed to zero out or have no setback along the side property line if it's interior to the lot like this. So I'm going to move now clockwise over here to about 1 or 2 o'clock, and you'll see this accessory structure meets the side setback of 7.5 feet and can be located in either the side or the rear. Moving on clockwise to about the 5 o'clock position, this is the new provision that we are building in, where if you're on an alley, and you'll see that this lot does have an alley behind it. If you're on an alley and you have the ability to zero out on the alley, then you may, it's not a must, but you may bring that accessory structure all the way to the corner on the side and the rear. Now, we have vetted this through our building department, through Dave McClellan, who's your development services manager and chief building official. he finds this to be appropriate because there are still fire codes that will need to be met, as well as building code elements, and has personally witnessed examples where this can work. And then moving on to the 7 o'clock position here, this is the other example that I mentioned earlier in the presentation, where an accessory structure could simply zero out on the alley itself, and then pull 7.5 feet off the property line. So the idea here is, especially in those urbanized areas, is to allow the accessory structure to sit right on the alley, so that a vehicle can pull right into the garage, or you just simply have the ability to pull that accessory structure to the back and have more private space in your rear yard. On the right-hand side of the screen, this exemplifies changes that we've made to the what I call the exterior side yard, or the term that we're building into the ordinance. Right now, on a corner lot, we have the front yard, and then this exterior side along the side street extends down to the back of the house. What we are proposing is that exterior side extend all the way to the back property line. What this does is this helps preserve this area to the rear of the house. It helps not negatively impact the neighbor that might be in the lot to the back or to the rear of the house, but then also provides for clean development lines on both block faces, both this primary block face and then this secondary block face. So what we're proposing is that this exterior side yard would extend all the way down to the rear property line. And so then accessory structures on lots like this would fall in this portion of the rear yard or the interior side. So almost done. I've got 3 slides here that give examples of how we are proposing to calculate accessory structure area, since we're proposing to get rid of the simple 2 or total number of 2 accessory structure cap, and instead moving it to this to a scale. And so I've got 3 examples here, both urban and suburban examples. Mr. Peterson had asked that we do some 3D imagery here, 3D graphics. And so we've worked with our GIS folks, and they've done a great job in pulling together some graphics for presentation purposes. So what I've got here, and these 2 on the left and the right, they're not necessarily married to each other. I'm just giving you a plan view and then the 3D view on the right. So you'll see the front yard, this is an interior lot, is in the front here, and then in blue is the rear. In this particular case, if someone was wanting to add an accessory structure based on our new provisions, rather than being capped at a total number of 2, you could do up to 50% of the area of your accessory structure could be 50% of the gross square footage of the house. So you can see in this example, you've got 3,500 square foot house. So 50% of that is 1,782. Now, there's a second calculation that we have to make, and that is, what is going to be the overall footprint of your accessory structures in the rear yard? Well, you cannot exceed 25% of the rear yard in terms of footprint. So 25% of the rear yard, which is 4,700 square feet. Oops, I've got that. I've got the calculation incorrect. I'm giving you the total square footage of the rear yard. But overall, the winning number in this particular case is 1,782, because regardless of the footprint, you cannot exceed the overall area. So in this particular case, it would be maxed out at 1,782. And in this case, they chose to divide it evenly between an 890 square foot pool and an 890 square foot pool house. So that's one example there. Moving on to a much larger, this is your estate size lot where you've got very large houses and very large yards. In this particular case, you have the principal house is 5,900 square feet. So 50% of that is 2,900, almost 3,000 square feet. And as we know, that's almost a full house, or sorry, that is a large house in many areas of the city. But again, in this particular case, you're looking at a situation where the principal house is quite large and the rear yard is a 1/4 acre itself. So 25% of the rear yard limits you there, and then you can see that 50% of the house being 3,000 square feet. So what they're able to do in this particular case is divide that 2968 into those 3 accessory structures. And then finally, moving on to a smaller urban size lot. In this particular case, you have a corner. So you have an arterial road here along the front and a local road here along the side. The principal house is 1,150 square feet. And in yellow, I'm showing where the new exterior side extends all the way back to the alley. So 50% of the 1,150 is 575 square feet. But if you recall from the ordinance, the proposal is that you can have up to 50% of the square footage of the house or 700 square feet, whichever is greater. And so in this particular case, the 700 square feet wins out. Now, when you calculate the rear yard, which is 3,300 square feet, 25% of that is 825 square feet. So again, you can't exceed the 700 square feet just because you're allowed to have 825 square feet of footprint. So this gives an example of where you have an existing accessory structure that's 110. You take that from the 700 and that leaves you with 590. The other reason why we like this example is because this shows how, with the change in the exterior side yard extending all the way to the alley, we will have situations where existing accessory structures extend into that exterior side yard. They will not have to be removed. Those are considered non-conforming. They can stay there forever and ever. In fact, they could even add on to them in the direction of the yard. They just couldn't add on in this exterior side yard area. So that gives an example of what might become a non-conforming structure, but the calculation or the square footage of that is taken into account. So I believe that's it. But again, the concept here is to make this a scalable situation instead of having a fixed cap on total number of structures or even a fixed cap on the overall height. Scale it to the lot, scale it to the home, and scale it to the area itself. And we believe that this will be very friendly to infill situations. We believe that it is market friendly, but also neighborhood friendly. So that's our proposal, and certainly open to any and all questions.
Mr. Mitchell, first of all, your presentation was great. Your graphics were very clear and user-friendly on our side to really understand what these recommendations are. Is there any consideration for an accessory structure that's going to be in someone's backyard to the neighbor whose home may be positioned differently on their lot that's not in line with the person who wants to put the accessory structure? For example, the neighbor's house may be on the back of their lot. So now you've got their house and this accessory structure almost parallel. For example, my house sits way on the back of the lot. We hardly have any backyard.
Mm-hmm.
So we would be looking at a neighbor's accessory structure. So I don't know if there's any consideration with different kinds of arrangements of, neighbors' lots and housing position.
So that is already limited and already guided by the ordinance as it sits today. Because you don't know, exactly how lot configuration is going to be. In an older neighborhood, you typically have grids. And then in the more modern suburban neighborhoods, you have more curvilinear streets, and it's more of a fluid type of subdivision. So you don't really know how the lot layout is going to, and then ultimately not only lot layout, but then exactly where they choose to build a home. So you don't really know that. So what you have to do is you have to code based on what is the most reasonable and what's the most appropriate standard. And so what we're doing here is from an appropriateness and from a reasonableness test, we believe that accessory structures should be located in the rear or the side yard, like they already are required now. And that they not be allowed in the front yard, because then you get into a whole nother situation. So they're limited to the side and rear. And we already have a fairly small setback for accessory structures anyway. So most of what we're talking about already exists today. What we're talking about is just creating a system of scale that's dependent on the lot size or the principal house size. So in your particular case, and I wish I had used your lot or one like it for our example, because you'll see there that in all three of our examples, the gross square footage of the house won out. And so if I had a fourth 3D image there where the gross square footage of the house was X, but the rear yard was very small, then the square footage of the rear yard, or the coverage of the rear yard, that being 25%, especially if the rear yard is small, that's going to severely limit any accessory structure size regardless of the principal structure. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it's a flip. It's your particular situation is going to be driven by the rear yard size, not by the house size. And so it's the opposite of the estate size lot. So again, as we drew this up, we knew that if you're going to scale this to the home, you can't just only scale it to the home, because you'll have a situation where you may have too large of an accessory structure on too small of a rear yard. And so that's why the 25% of the rear yard is also taken into consideration.
Other questions and discussion? I do have another question, but I don't want to hog the mic here. Commissioner Calhoun, you're on the Planning Commission. What was the discussion there?
A couple of comments, and Preston, you correct me if I'm wrong here. We had a committee that worked on this for quite a while, and I think I can't remember the date that it did pass sometime. I think it was back in March. A lot of conversation about the possibility of some larger structures being on some larger pieces of land, and it still was passed by the Planning Commission. The question I have maybe for Preston is, do we have a backlog of people that are waiting for this to be acted upon that has been communicated through your office? Do you have any idea of, I know I've gotten at least one call that was, when's this going to be done? I'm waiting to do something. Are there a large number of people out there who've communicated through your office that are waiting for this?
I think that a large number is subjective, but we do have quite a few folks that are waiting on this. There has been interest in our urban neighborhoods, and then and we've had less interest, out in the suburbs, but in your more urbanized areas, and then a couple of the areas that are just outside of downtown. Like extending out towards the Carnegie, extending out towards Oak Park and Gump Edition area. So yes, we do have folks who are waiting on this, just like the conversation regarding the boat dock situation. That gentleman is waiting on this. So yes, this is not only in response, like I said, to us. We believe that this is the time to have a policy adjustment based on BZA caseload and analysis that staff has made of the ordinance, but also based on market demand.
Other questions or comments? If the person has the right lot size in the tree streets, for example, and they met all the criteria, to your first example, to build a 1,700 square foot accessory structure, that's bigger than many houses. So tell me how that works. And they're not for, habitation. I mean, but a 1,700-foot structure, that's a pretty big addition in a neighborhood that is historic. Was there anything on the tree streets where the discussion about adding these kind of structures in a historic zone might be contradictory to the historic, goals and objectives?
No, ma'am. In fact, I believe two of the individuals who are waiting and interested in this text amendment are in the Tree Streets area. One is particularly interested in the ability to zero out their accessory structure on the existing alley. And then another is interested in the ability to have the accessory structure scalable to the size of the house. And then also the height of that being able to punch a little bit higher than 15 feet, but recognizing that it can't exceed the midpoint of the roof. So again, you're right in terms of when you just look at the square footage of the principal structure and then take 50% of that, that may be a number that appears or feels high, but if someone chooses to use all of that in one structure, then they've used all allowable square footage, unless they do an addition on their main house, they've used all allowable square footage for that one accessory structure. Generally what we find, and I have found personally or professionally over my time in this job, is that folks will generally divide that square footage up over several structures. Folks a lot of times will want to have a greenhouse. Folks will a lot of times want to have a pool. Folks will want to have a simple bunce building or a mower shed. So we do find that they do get divided up. You do have those situations where somebody wants to use all that square footage, but again, it is going to be capped by the square footage of the house or the area of the rear yard. Both of those things have to be taken into consideration. And so then the resulting number we have found, and we have tested this in both urban areas and in suburban, we have found that the resulting number is compatible with the neighborhood.
If a person wants to add an accessory structure of that size, who are from the Tree Streets, which is in the historic zone, would they have to go before the Historic Zoning Commission for approval first?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, have they seen this ordinance or this change?
They have not, only because they are not arbiters of the zoning ordinance. But we can certainly, in the interim, we can run this through the Historic Zoning Commission. They just don't have any authority over the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance instead acts to enable or to allow us to enforce the historic district guidelines.
But they would have authority to either grant or deny somebody to build a structure.
They would have the ability to impose their historic district guidelines as they are written and adopted today. If those historic district guidelines, and keep in mind, those are going to regulate the aesthetics of the structure as opposed to the square footage or the height or even the location. So they should be two completely separate conversations. On the zoning side, we're going to be looking at it from where, in terms of location, side or rear, height, and then area. And then they will be looking at it in terms of materials of the walls, materials of the doors and windows, materials of the roof.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Good job of presenting that. Thank you.
Oh, yes, thank you. And I have corrections on my numbers on those two of those lots. I had some of the 25% messed up, but I'll be happy to, I'll have that cleaned up for the second reading.
Okay, commissioners, do we have a motion?
Mayor, I'll make a motion.
Move for approval.
Okay, I'll second that then.
We have a little delay, I think, on Commissioner Fowler's.
Did I hear
Broadband.
Fowler move to approve?
I think we did, yes.
Okay, well,
Yes.
I'll second that then.
Are we freezing? Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Fowler and a second by Commissioner Calhoun. Is that correct? Ms.
Correct.
Jan- Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Is there any other discussion? We will have public hearing at our next, in 2 weeks when we'll be meeting in person. We'll talk about that in just a few minutes. So I'll be anxious to have public hearing on this. Commissioner Calhoun, did any residents call in during the Planning Commission meeting? You just muted yourself. There you go.
I'm sorry, you talking to me?
Yeah, I'm talking to you.
I don't recall. I'm sorry, you talking to me?
I'm talking to you.
Preston may remember that. Mary, you're freezing up on me there occasionally.
Yeah, everybody's freezing. It must be the
I'm
weather.
acting like I'm freezing up.
Okay.
I don't recall. I know there was a lot of conversation about this over a number of meetings and committee meetings. So, but I'm sure that I think the Tree Streets are having a meeting somewhere in the next week and a half or so to discuss it amongst themselves. And I think we will get a lot of public input before we have our second, when we have our second reading.
Very good. If there's nothing else, Ms. Jennings, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter,
Yes.
Mayor Brock.
Mayor,
Yes.
your next order of business is consideration of ordinance number 4745-20. An ordinance to establish the property tax rates, appropriate funds, and adopt a budget for the fiscal year July 1st, 2020 through June 30, 2021. This is your budget ordinance. I will point out to you that this has been a challenging budget. Everyone's very familiar with the impact of the COVID-19 virus and the impact on our economic state. It has resulted in a very significant loss of revenue in the fourth quarter of the current fiscal year, which ends the end of this month. And we're projecting that the revenues will be depressed again next year throughout the budget cycle. So we had a couple of directives to staff when we were building this budget, and that was in recognition of the dire economic climate, that there would be no property tax increase. So this budget does not include a property tax increase, that all services would be delivered with the same quality, frequency, and the normal service delivery, so that our customer base will see no change whatsoever in what we do and how we do it. So all services will not be impacted, and that we are building this budget with utilizing part of our fund balance as well as operating reductions. And typically, and Mr. Thompson will get into this in detail in a minute. Typically, anytime we have debt service roll off, we reutilize that to issue new debt so that our annual debt service payments don't increase. In this particular year, we have $1.6 million that is debt service that is rolling off, that we are going to utilize to make up for loss of operating revenues And in this case, that debt service roll-off will be rolled back into the operating budget. So that's the budget at the 1,000,000-foot level. And at this time, I'd like to ask Dustin Thompson if he would walk you through the details of the budget. And at the conclusion of his presentation, Dustin and Bob and I are prepared to answer any questions that you may have.
Dustin, before you start, I also want to make a comment. Mr. Peterson, you were talking about the assumptions the budget was built around. The other item too is there are no employee raises built into this budget. And I know as a person who's served on the commission since 2013, we've been working very hard to try to get our compensation package much more competitive and being able to recruit and retain, the best employees. And so this part I really hate that it's that stark. So if things turn around and our revenues come in a lot stronger than what we're anticipating, that's certainly something at some point in time I would like to see as a priority that we get back on track.
Yes, ma'am. And you make a really good point that I should have clarified a little further. We have built this budget based on what we hope is a worst case scenario. That way, if there is a long-term downturn in the economy or a second wave of negative economic impact, we feel like we have a budget before you for consideration that takes all of that into consideration and leaves us in a position that we're in a good position to handle what may come up over the course of the next year. If, as you pointed out, revenues come in better than we have budgeted, we will obviously be reviewing the budget and the monthly financials on a monthly basis. And our plan at this point, with your blessing, would be to take a really long and deep look at where we stand in the month of January or February, because those are big sales tax months for us, December and January. And if we're in a better financial position than what we've budgeted for, then we can certainly do a budget amendment and reappropriate those unanticipated revenues to go back and address things that we have cut out of this budget this year. Dustin, if you would, please, sir.
Yes, sir. I'm going to get my screen up here. All righty. All right. Appreciate everyone's time this evening. And as the manager said, if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm going to try to go through this in detail, but quickly for the sake of time. As we have discussed in the past, we are projecting 21's revenues to be off, excuse me, by about $2.9 million. That's 3.2%. Here is a list of notable decreases in revenue. On a positive note, we do have some revenues coming in. These are one-time revenues that we'll use to purchase capital equipment. You, at your last meeting, you approved a resolution for the local government supports grants, which is for $1.5 million, and that has been submitted to the state. They have received it. We also have the VW settlement grant funds that will go towards the purchase of school buses. Again, these are one-time funds. Here's a breakdown of revenue, how much is by percentage, property tax, sales tax, so forth. Our original plan, as the mayor pointed out, was to fund a 4% pay plan adjustment. We typically fund up to $3 million a year for capital equipment, and additional $1 million for projects, cash fund projects on top of any bond proceeds that are spent on projects. As the manager mentioned a few moments ago, regarding debt, issuance of debt has been we will not issue the debt that was proposed to roll off in 21. The current budget, the budget as is presented to you all this evening, has no pay plan adjustment. The equipment that is budgeted is mostly budgeted through grants. There are only carryover monies, carryover projects for FY21 in the general fund. There is no new money for projects. And the debt, like I mentioned, has been absorbed. The debt roll-off has been absorbed into the operating budget. This budget does have a 12.2% increase in health insurance. The city is absorbing the employee increase, meaning that the employees will not see an increase in FY21 in their insurance premiums. The city is absorbing that. However, retiree premiums will increase by 10%. There are no new positions in this budget. We have frozen vacant positions, unfunded vacant positions in the proposed budget, reduced fuel budget, gone in and made several operating reductions to the tune of about $350,000. And I've mentioned the debt roll-off. A couple items that are included in the operating budget, specifically the Public Works operating budget, is the stream bank mitigation project at Buffalo Valley and streetscape work out at Mount Castle and North Rome. Here's a breakdown of our general fund operating budget expenditures and our operating transfers out. As you can see, the bulk of the operating transfers out are for schools, followed by the debt service fund. Here's a list of positions that I mentioned that we have unfunded in the general fund. All these are vacant positions. Concerning capital equipment, most of the capital equipment is either bond funded, bond proceeds, grant funded, or grant funded. Just a small amount, $80,025, is funded through the general fund transfer this year. As I mentioned earlier, we typically fund $3 million, up to $3 million in equipment on a cash basis in the general fund each year. For projects, capital projects in the general fund, again, there is no new money. All these funds are carried over from FY20, and you see a list of projects proposed for FY21, again, with carryover funds from the prior year. The proposed debt that was to be issued this year has been shifted to 21. The debt roll-off for FY21 that is currently in the debt schedule has been absorbed, like I mentioned, into the general fund. This is our funding for schools. You see the general fund transfer, which is the same as FY20, excuse me. It's the same for FY21 as it is in FY20. And then our school transportation budget and our share of school debt. So in total, we fund schools at $14.3 million. Here is a list of the quasi-governmental agencies that we fund, their FY20 budget, what they requested for 21, and then what we propose to be funded for 21. Everyone, for the most part, remains flat. Most everyone's request was the same as 20 anyway. with the exception of a couple, but we propose a flat budget for quasis. Just want to talk to you in a little bit more detail about capital equipment and other funds. The public safety radios, that's a rebudget. That's budgeted in the current year. This will carry over to 21. We talked very briefly about mass transit equipment. The local match for us on that is a little over $66,000. And the cameras for the police vehicles, those are funded out of police technology. Here's a list of solid waste equipment that is proposed in the solid waste fund. Here's a list of capital equipment and projects in the stormwater fund. I'll note at the bottom, we do have $4 million in new debt proposed to be issued in the stormwater fund for West Walnut. Here's a list of water sewer capital, their fleet, their cash funded projects, as well as their debt funded projects for FY21. Your total budget, your total proposed budget for FY21, all funds, that includes general funds, debt service, all the school funds, all the enterprise funds, all funds, is $237.9 million. And you can see a breakdown of FY20 versus 21 and the changes. And here is that continued. The budget in its entirety, all 21 funds, is down about $12 million. As you can see, the bulk of that is in capital. A lot in debt service fund. Those are obviously connected. But the budget in total is down $12 million or down 4.8%. And that's all I have in terms of a presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have, research anything further you may want researched.
Yeah, one question. The slide that had carryover funds for capital projects in this coming year, do those amounts complete those projects, or are those projects going to be completed during the next fiscal year, or are some of those going to go all the way over into fiscal year 2022?
All of those will complete in the upcoming fiscal year. So they should be completed in the next 12 to 13 months. Yes, sir.
Okay.
So some of those will happen really quick. For example, the Carver splash pad and the restroom is grant funded from the state. And we've got a time deadline, I think, which is next February to have that project complete. The design work's done, and I think the bids have already been let. So that project will probably, for example, that project will probably be complete sometime in October. The Rotary Park restrooms have been designed, and we're going to do those in-house. And I think Water Sewers is gearing up to do the water sewer line extensions, and our in-house facility crews will be doing the construction there. Those will be done before Christmas. So there's a number of those things that are going to happen really quick. There may be a couple of them that extend over into next spring, but they should all be done before the close of FY22. It'll be FY21, excuse me.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Any other questions or comments? Again, I would point out that, we're still going to add a lot of value, and we're still going to add a lot of reinvestment into our community and our infrastructure. As a reminder, stormwater, solid waste, and water sewer in particular are all enterprise funds, and their budgets are driven by the revenues that those funds generate through user fees. Therefore, that's the reason you see a lot of equipment replacement and a lot of capital projects there. Their revenue streams have been impacted, but not to the degree that the general fund has, due to the fact we're so heavily dependent on sales tax and they aren't. So we're going to be continuing to make very strategic and very important infrastructure improvements in our community. It's just going to be over on the general fund side that, we've had to make some reductions. Another thing that I will remind you of, there is a full annual allocation of funding in next year's budget for street resurfacing.
Yes.
So that is in your budget. We've been asked to follow up on the potential to get some economy due to the fact that oil prices have fluctuated and some of those things. Those conversations have begun, and we're negotiating our way through that. And right now, I think that it's important that we make those kinds of strategic investments in our infrastructure, because those are public safety vehicles, school buses, roads, water, sewer, those types of things. You can't afford to get behind in your maintenance and your reinvestment into that type of infrastructure, because you never get caught up. And we have the good fortune to have the ability to continue those investments in these dire economic times and without having to do a property tax increase.
Mr. Peterson, you and I were discussing earlier today. I just wanted to be clear that there was a decrease in funding to the JCDA for a marketing position. And that's a position and special events. And we've had this discussion many times about the importance of the special events person and the marketing of our city as we're trying to come out of this economic crisis we've been in and how we get our city back on track. I'm really concerned that that position is going away, and I don't see where it's being picked up anywhere else. So wherever it's going to be, I just really want to be in favor that we make sure that is funded as something that's integral into our, us keeping Johnson City in the forefront of visitors and events that occur here. Hopefully, with the encouragement that it's one of those quality of life issues that help attract businesses that may be looking at us to come here.
Yes, ma'am. Our proposal and recommendation to you would be to allow us to put $50,000 into the communications and marketing budget to fund that position. That will allow us to better coordinate the events throughout the community, regardless of what part of town it's in. I think it'll also streamline the process that is currently in place, to where people that want to do something, for example, in Founders, they need to go to the JCDA and the JCDA website and do some preliminary work. And then they've got to come up here and go through the approval process and then go back to JCDA. And I think if we can consolidate in those activities and requirements, and to take out some of the handoffs, because, as we're all familiar, every time something changes hands, there's an opportunity for a fumble or a miscommunication. I think we can greatly streamline the process by that structural change with special events. So that would be our recommendation. And as you pointed out, since we had been talking about this budget, I didn't want to make any structural changes in what we had presented to you over the past 6 weeks or so. So that would be the one thing that I would ask you to include as part of your approval of the proposed budget as it sits. would be to add $50,000 to marketing and communications for that events position.
All right, commissioners, any comments or agreement, disagreement on that?
I appreciate all the work that's been done on the budget by everyone, especially when it's a moving target and we don't know exactly where it's going to go, but appreciate all the hard work.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
On the Mr. Peterson's request to, I guess, make an addition to this budget of $50,000 to go into communication and marketing for the city for a position that would fill that gap that we've been talking about a lot. Are we okay with that?
I'm supportive of that. Where it lands and you know, whether it's JCDA, whether it's in the city, it has to happen. It's just got to be somewhere, and I'd be in favor of adding that money to the budget.
Any other comments?
We need
Input?
public hearing.
Pardon me?
We need to have public hearing
Right now.
before you vote.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I just want to make sure that we
Okay, I just want
Mr. Peterson's requesting of us. And so what do you need from us, Pete, to
We need you to open up the public hearing on the budget ordinance. And once that is concluded, we'll need you all to need someone to make a motion, and not trying to put words in anybody's mouth, but a motion to approve the budget as presented with the change of adding $50,000 to communications and marketing for the funding of the events position.
Very good. That's what we need, specific directions here. Okay. All right, I will open up the public hearing on the proposal for the city budget for 2021. Ms. Graham, do we have anyone in the waiting room who would like to have input?
No, ma'am.
Okay, you just put that on the screen, so let's give it another 20 seconds or so to see if anybody dials in.
Can I say something for a second while we're
Yes, sir.
waiting?
Go right ahead.
I have been going through a little thunderstorm here in Mayflower, Arkansas, where I'm coming remotely to you today. But I just wanted to thank everyone for their work on the budget, especially when it's moving like it is.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Graham, do we have anyone yet?
No, ma'am.
Okay, hearing no one for public hearing, I will close the public hearing. Do we have a motion for the budget?
Move approval.
I would move for approval.
Okay, is there an addition of the additional $50,000 to move for approval with the addition of the $50,000 as identified by Mr. Peterson?
I'm sorry, that was assumed on my side in my motion that was part of the motion, is to put the $50,000 into as recommended by Peter.
Okay, very good.
I was
Did you get that, Ms.
second
Jennings?
that.
Okay,
Yes, who seconded that?
Commissioner Fowler.
And you're
I
okay
did.
with that change?
Yes.
Okay, very good. All right, is there any other discussion or questions? Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter,
Yes.
Mayor Brock.
Yes.
Thank you, commissioners. We appreciate that. This is probably an appropriate time to discuss earlier in our budget workshop discussions. As you're aware, we have to have public hearing on first reading, and we have to have all three readings completed and the budget approved prior to June 30, which always requires us to have a special call meeting sometime during the month of June. Previously, we had discussed having a special call meeting 1 week from today on June the 11th for second reading on the budget ordinance and any other ordinances that you deem you'd like to consider at that time. Is that still the desire of the commission, or would you like to do a special call meeting on a different day than next Thursday, June the 11th?
What's your preference?
I'm fine with the 11th.
I'm fine with the 11th myself.
So,
Yeah, 11th is fine.
Would historically or traditionally, we have done those meetings like about 7 or 7:30 in the morning. Would that be the desire this year to do a meeting at 7:30 a.m. or is there a different time of the day that works better?
I think particularly for those who have office hours that may start 8 o'clock or so, if it works for them, the 7:30 time frame, I think that would be best.
Yeah.
Or 4, yeah.
Okay.
is this going to be an in-person meeting or is it going to be a Zoom meeting?
We can do it either way.
Okay, what's your preference? Do you want to Zoom it or meet in person? It'll just be a very short meeting, so might be best if we just go ahead and set up the Zoom line and dial in.
That's fine with me.
Okay.
I'm good with it.
Okay.
Okay. I took that as direction that we will have a special called meeting next Thursday, June the 11th at 7:30 a.m. and that it will be a meeting held via Zoom, an electronic meeting, and the agenda will include second reading of your budget ordinance. Is there any other business that you're aware of that you would like to include on the special call meeting? If you can't think of anything now and you think of something in the next day or two, let us know just so we can get it advertised appropriately and meeting the advertising requirements.
Very good. Okay, thank you.
Your next order of business is ordinances and resolutions for consideration on second reading and public hearing. The first being a resolution for the Sharp Farm annexation associated with ordinance number 4746-20. A resolution to annex certain property located within the 11th Civil District of Washington County, Tennessee, adjoining the present corporate boundaries of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, and to incorporate the same within the corporate boundaries of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, said property being known as the Sharp Farm annexation. To zone said property B4 Planned Arterial Business District as described herein, and to amend the zoning map of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee accordingly, being a part of the appendix to ordinance number 1519, is ready for your consideration on
First reading.
first reading.
Okay, you were losing me there when we were going to second reading, so
Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry. That's first reading. I was looking at the wrong ordinances.
You're at
That was-
6.3 ordinance 4746-20.
That is correct. I did read the right ordinance number and the right caption. I was just looking at the wrong place on the agenda. It is first reading.
Very good.
Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. City Commission, this is a request for a portion of a property that is located along Christian Church Road. And I don't have a formal presentation, but what I will do is share my screen and just show you the map. Got here the GIS map, and this property here is located on the corner of Christian Church Road and Boone Station Road. The total acreage of the lot is roughly 35 acres. And so this is a request to only annex 19.5 acres, this upper portion. immediately adjacent to Christian Church and Boone Station Road, and then on the east side of the railroad tracks. As the manager indicated, the proposal is to apply the B4 zoning. So if I turn on the zoning map here, you can see that what shows up in color is City of Johnson City zoning. You'll see that there is large swaths of B4 in this area, in the interchange or exit 17 area. You'll note that what is identified as RTP, this is the Wellmont or the Ballard piece, which is wrapping up its rezoning. It is already before you, I believe, through second reading to rezone that to B4 as well. In terms of the future land use designation does identify this as commercial, which you can see here identified in red. The entire interchange is identified as commercial land use. It does switch on the western side of the railroad tracks, but in this particular area, it is identified as commercial. This area is also within the Regional Retail and Tourism Development District, which you adopted that map, that 950-acre district at the end of 2019. And the city manager has sent that along with other documentation to Nashville for final approval. So the recommendation to you from the Planning Commission was a split vote. It was 5-3, but they do recommend in favor.
Just a kind of a tactical question, I guess. They're only requesting 19 acres and and zone B4. So they have a commercial development in mind, and it falls within the economic development zone. So they would be eligible for incentives. But let's assume that development expanded onto the portion of their property that was not annexed. That would not be eligible for incentives. Is that correct, Mr. Peterson?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
Okay. Okay. All right. Could you also expand for us a little bit, Mr. Mitchell, why the dissenting side at the Planning Commission, what their justification was?
Sure. I think that they were responding, number one, to the concerns that were expressed by this community, the Boones Creek community that is to the west of the railroad tracks. Certainly there were some passionate and valid comments brought forward as it relates to building out, intensifying this area around exit 17 with additional commercial development, potential multifamily, large scale retail and the like. Anytime you have those kinds of, or the potential for those kinds of change, folks are going to be concerned because of how it may impact their particular way of life, especially if they're living in more of a rural area. So those were understood and validated, and I believe that there were comments from several of the planning commissioners in support of that. The other is there were concerns about extension of water and sewer lines up Christian Church Road, and then the current condition of Christian Church Road. However, there was a fairly easy response to that. Number one being that any extension of water and sewer line up Christian Church Road, that cost would be diluted with the development of other properties. For example, there's the Onk property here. If this property ever redevelops, that would be directly in front of any water and sewer extensions. The Ballard piece, if and when it develops, it would certainly take advantage of those extensions. We believe that the extensions currently water and sewer come right up to the point here. So those can be distributed or diluted among several properties. The other is that the likelihood that Christian Church Road gets widened with assistance from the state is much higher now with the reconstruction of exit 17 and how they have cut off Lake Drive here, and Lake Drive is now a right in, right out only. And so there will be traffic really being directed to this interchange or to this signalized intersection here with Boones Creek and Christian Church Road. So the need to upgrade Christian Church Road all the way will be high in the near future. There was conversation as part of the some time back, many months ago, when there was a proposal for the call center to be located out here in this area. There was conversation, this was pre-COVID, that the state would participate in widening and improving Christian Church Road, basically up to the Ballad piece. That has, since changed because of our current circumstances. But conversation is that there would be a need and potential partnership with the state on improving Christian Church all the way. So those were the concerns expressed by those who voted against. But again, the vote ended up being 5-3. A lot of really good conversation, and I'm sure Commissioner Calhoun may have his own take on that.
Well, Mr. Mitchell said it quite well. A lot of conversation, and this is an issue that when it came to the Planning Commission, actually it was deferred to have a meeting with the developer and owner, which occurred. And I think one of the concerns is exactly what's going to go on the property. And certainly that's while we would like to know the exact things that's going to go on the property, that really doesn't affect or can't affect whether or not we decide to annex and plan a service, et cetera. It's in the incentive zone, and there was concern about why not all 35 acres. But we felt like this was different now that it's not just the couple of acres that came before us before. And since it is in the incentive zone and it does meet the future land use, I think the majority of the Planning Commission was in favor. And the citizens, obviously, they had some very, very good points and comments that it is going to change that particular area, which pretty much is going to be inevitable, I think.
Thank you. Any other questions of Mr. Mitchell before we move on? All right. Is there a motion?
Hey, Jenny.
Go ahead. Yeah.
After this vote, I'll have to drop off for about an hour, and I'll come back on.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Is there
move to approve the
is there a
annexation?
second? Do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay, and we'll be talking about public hearing on this in general here in just a minute. But let's go ahead and take a vote, Ms. Jennings.
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter,
Yes.
Mayor Brock.
Yes.
Commissioners, your next order of business is consideration of ordinance number 4746-20. An ordinance to amend the zoning map of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, being part of the appendix to ordinance number 1519, entitled an ordinance to adopt a code of laws and ordinances for the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, and to repeal all laws and ordinances in conflict therewith and amendatory thereof by assigning B4 planned arterial business zoning to a portion of certain property within the 11th Civil District of Washington County, Tennessee, known as the Shark Farm Annexation. This ordinance is ready for your consideration on first reading. This is the ordinance that applies zoning to the property that you just considered in the resolution for annexation.
And I think, I believe Mr. Mitchell covered that one pretty good, that is compatible with surrounding properties for B4. Were there any questions or, concerns about it being?
I would go ahead and move for approval.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any other discussion? Ms. Jennings?
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Mayor Brock.
Yes.
At this time, we ask that you give consideration to the plan of services for the Sharp Farm annexation. This is first reading on this plan of services, and as is pointed out in the plan of services, that all city services will be made available to this upon the point of time of annexation. Public water will be extended within 5 years from the effective date of the annexation or before a development on the site obtains a certificate of occupancy, whichever is earlier. Sewer service has the same requirements of us. All other city services are immediately available and require no extensions of service other than that water and sewer. And as Mr. Mitchell pointed out, those extensions will serve multiple parcels. And this is a very minimal expenditure to extend those services. We would recommend your approval of the plan of services as presented.
We'll move to approve.
Okay.
Second.
All right, a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Ms. Jennings?
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Mayor Brock.
Yes.
This brings you to a resolution associated with ordinance number 4740-20, known as the Nectal annexation. The resolution reads as follows. If I can get the paper to turn here. A resolution to annex certain property located within the 11th Civil District of Washington County, Tennessee, adjoining the present corporate boundaries of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, and to incorporate the same within the corporate boundaries of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, said property being known as the Nectal annexation. To zone said property R2 low density residential as described herein, and to amend the zoning map of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee accordingly, being a part of the appendix to ordinance number 1519, is ready for your consideration on second reading after public hearing.
Okay. And Mr. Peterson and commissioners, I think because we are meeting electronically tonight, we have 7 different ordinances that require public hearing tonight, that we should extend the public hearing through third reading as well to make, and since we'll be meeting in person at our next meeting, that will make it a little more accessible to people who want to come. So I'm going to propose that we have public hearing tonight for those who may call in, and then extend that through third reading, if you're good with that. Okay. All right. Do we have a motion? Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. I will open the public hearing on resolution 4740-20, the Nectal annexation request. Do we have anyone in the green room?
No, ma'am.
Okay. All right, hearing no one, I will close the public hearing. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Approval.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Any other comments? Questions? Ms. Jennings?
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Mayor Brock.
Yes.
Your next order of business is consideration of ordinance number 4740-20. An ordinance to amend the zoning map of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, being part of the appendix to ordinance number 1519, entitled an ordinance to adopt a code of laws and ordinances for the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, and to repeal all laws and ordinances in conflict therewith and amendatory thereof by assigning R2 low density residential zoning to certain property within the 11th Civil District of Washington County, Tennessee, known as the Nectal annexation. Again, this is the ordinance that assigns zoning to the property you just voted to annex.
Okay, the request is for R2, single family. Is there a motion? Oh, excuse me. I will open the public hearing on the request for zoning.
Madam Mayor, if I may.
Yes, sir.
This would be a question for Ms. Sandos. I see her sitting behind Mr. Peterson. On the resolution, I did not want to interrupt, but where the mayor closed the public hearing, should we be just leaving it open, just stating that the public hearing will remain open so that she doesn't have to formally reopen it again on the 18th? That's best.
Good point. What's our advisory?
Yes, that would be advisable to leave that open.
Okay, well, on that particular one, we'll have to reopen it again, but on all the ones going forward, we will keep it open. Thank you. Ms. Graham, do we have anyone for public input on 4740-20?
No, ma'am.
Okay. We will keep the public hearing open on this ordinance. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, any other discussion? Ms. Jennings? Ms. Jennings, you can call the roll. She may be on mute.
I think she's left the meeting, possibly accidentally.
Okay, Mr. Peterson, do we have someone who is authorized to do the roll call?
Yes, ma'am. I will do my best to fill in.
Okay, go ahead.
The motion is to approve the ordinance number 4740-20 on second reading. Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Mayor Brock.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Fowler. I was scrambling trying to remember who was here.
I understand.
Okay. The next item for your consideration is the plan of services for the Nectal annexation. The public water is available to the property. Public sewer extension will be made no later than 2 years upon request by the property, who will be responsible for a sewer pump installation and the cost of extending the sewer line from the property line along Boring Chapel Road to their house. The plan of services run with the land and will apply to all future owners of the property. The provision of all other services, including but not limited to police, fire, and school transit, shall begin on the effective date of the annexation in accordance with city policies. The property owner is aware of these conditions and is in agreement. We would recommend your approval of the plan of services as proposed.
I will open the public hearing on the plan of services for 4740-20. Ms. Graham, is there anyone in the waiting room?
No, ma'am.
Okay, we will leave the public hearing open through third reading. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Move for approval.
Okay. You can take either one you want there. So the other one will be the backup. Okay. Mr. Peterson, you may call the roll.
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Mayor Brock.
Yes.
The motion for the approval of the plan of services carries 3-0. Your next order of business is consideration of ordinance number 4741-20. An ordinance to abandon a portion of an alley transversing properties at 1008 East 8th Avenue and 1010 East 8th Avenue, and a portion of Wall Street right-of-way adjoining 1008 East 8th Avenue upon the terms and conditions contained herein, and repealing all ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith. is ready for your consideration on second reading after public hearing. As we pointed out last time, these are platted alleys and right-of-ways that have never been developed. And actually, I think there are some structures that exist over top or in extremely close proximity to these platted but undeveloped rights of way. And this is an action that will clean up all of these things, and we would recommend your approval.
Very good. I'll open the public hearing on ordinance 474120. Ms. Graham, do we have anyone in the waiting room for input?
We do not, and Miss Jennings is back on the call with us.
Okay, very good. Welcome back.
Technology.
Yeah. We will leave the public hearing open through third reading. Do we have a motion?
Move to
Move
approve.
for approval.
I'll take them.
The first
All
one
right.
you hear is the motion. The second is the second. Okay. All right, Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Mayor Brock,
Yes.
Next is ordinance number 4742-20. An ordinance to amend the zoning map of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, being part of the appendix to ordinance number 1519, entitled an ordinance to adopt a code of laws and ordinances for the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, and to repeal all laws and ordinances in conflict therewith and amendatory thereof by changing from RTP, Research Technology Park zoning, to B4, Planned Arterial Business zoning, and RTP to RO2, Medium Density Residential Professional Office zoning, portions of certain property with tax map ID 45, parcel 52.00. Ready for your consideration on second reading after public hearing. Mr. Mitchell, would you like to give them a brief recap and review of this ordinance, please, sir?
Yes, sir, I would. Thank you. Is there any way, Wendy, that we could pull that down just for one moment? Thank you. And I'll make this quick. Thank you, ma'am. So what you got on the screen here is the current zoning map. This property here, it is all one piece. It's owned by Mr. Stout. This is the Stout Farm piece, currently zoned RTP. And so, again, as or similar comments that we made on the Ballad piece, this is a staff-initiated rezoning to convert RTP to zoning that is more consistent with development growth and patterns in certain areas, but at the same time taking into consideration impacts on adjoining neighborhoods. And so in this particular case, what we are proposing is to divide the RTP into two different zones. On the left or on the west of State of Franklin, we're proposing the B4, which you can see here. You've got B4 to the north and B4 to the south. So that would make the B4 consistent all the way through here on the western side of State of Franklin. And then you have county as you go further west. That's why you don't see colors there. On the east side of State of Franklin, what we were proposing is RO2. That's the residential office. That is a good transitional zone that allows for professional office, some institutional, higher density residential, really all forms of residential, everything from single family to duplex to multifamily. But again, operating as a transitional zone between State of Franklin and the low density single family neighborhood further to the east. In the beginning, when this first came to the Planning Commission, there was significant opposition from the adjoining neighborhood. And in fact, I actually ran into someone over the weekend who continues to follow this case very closely. They are aware that the public hearing is tonight, so they may even be on the call. But when it went, so forgive me, it went to the Planning Commission initially. Planning Commission was concerned about the fact that we had not received any comment back from the property owner, Mr. Stout. So the Planning Commission directed staff to send a certified letter to the property owner, which we did, and then still did not receive any phone calls, emails, or communication from the property owner. So taking it back to the Planning Commission, continued to move forward, and ultimately the Planning Commission voted in favor. So that's what we have before us tonight. Again, a split recommendation, B4 on the west and RO2 on the east. And turn it back over to you for public hearing, Madam Mayor. Mayor, you are on mute.
Thank you. I am on mute. Yes. I have a dog in the room, and that's why I've been going on mute a lot. Who's been just scared with the storm. I will open the public hearing. Is there anyone, Mrs. Graham, who is in the waiting room who would like to speak?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Hearing no one to speak, we will leave the public hearing open through third reading. They'll have a chance again at the next reading. Do I have a motion on the floor?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Ms. Jennings?
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Mayor Brock.
Yes.
Your next order of business is consideration of ordinance number 4743-20. An ordinance to amend the zoning map of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, being part of the appendix to ordinance number 1519, entitled an ordinance to adopt a code of laws and ordinances of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, and to repeal all laws and ordinances in conflict therewith and amendatory thereof by changing from R2C low density residential zoning to B4 planned arterial business zoning, certain property located at 2919 Dorothy Street in Johnson City, otherwise identified on tax map 37D, Group E, Parcel 12, is ready for your consideration on second reading after public hearing.
Okay. Mr. Mitchell, did you have any overview other than what Mr. Peterson said you want us to know? Okay.
No, forgive me. Hang on one second. I was trying to unmute.
Yeah. Okay. Very good.
There we go. Okay. Just want to add a couple of things real quick. This is the section of Dorothy Street is right off of a section of East Oakland that has a number of small businesses. It extends between North Rhone and State of Franklin, and it is just west of Wallace Subaru. It's on your way going towards Browns Mill. So as I zoom in here, this is behind the Mellow Mushroom. It is this piece right here that is currently zoned residential, but has been used as a commercial piece of property for a number of years. Property owner is looking to sell this property, would like to maintain commercial usage, and therefore the request to have it match the B4 zoning in the area. We do want to note that for some strange reason, the future land use map divides down the middle of Oakland as opposed to dividing along rear property lines like you typically have. And I can turn on the future land use map. You can see here where it divides down the center of Oakland, but as you can see, development patterns, the market has demanded commercial despite the future land use map. You have commercial on both sides of Oakland here. And so despite that particular situation, staff did recommend approval and the Planning Commission supported. Thank you.
Very good. I'll open the public hearing on ordinance, well, I've lost my thing, 4743-20. Ms. Graham, is there anyone in the waiting room?
No, ma'am.
Okay, we'll leave the public hearing open through third reading. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? Ms. Jennings?
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Mayor Brock.
Yes.
Your next order of business is consideration of ordinance number 4744-20. An ordinance to amend Article 6, the use requirements by district in the City of Johnson City zoning ordinance, is ready for your consideration on second reading after public hearing. Mr. Mitchell, would you explain the ordinance, please, sir?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. This is a correction ordinance. It is one to correct an error we have found in the zoning ordinance, allowing veterinary offices to operate in a variety of different commercial zones, where, according to the technical reading of the ordinance, they are limited to industrial districts. The use clinic has been, or the term clinic has been used in the past, but clinics by definition are limited to human operations, not including animal. And so what we are doing is we are allowing for veterinary clinics and animal hospitals to continue to operate, bringing many that are non-conforming right now into conforming status, and would allow the growth of other veterinary clinics in the appropriate commercial zones. Planning Commission did recommend approval.
Good. I'll open the public hearing on ordinance number 4744-20. Ms. Graham, is there anyone in the waiting room for input?
No, ma'am.
Okay, I'll leave the public hearing open through third reading. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, any other discussion or questions? Ms. Jennings?
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Mayor Brock.
Yes.
Commissioners, I would point out to you that that is an ordinance that we've been asked to expedite. I would recommend that you add that ordinance to your special call meeting that you have scheduled for Thursday, June the 11th at 7:30 a.m.
We can do that. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Your next order of business is ordinance number 4736-20. An ordinance to amend the zoning map of the City of Johnson City, Tennessee, being part of the appendix to ordinance number 1519, entitled An Ordinance to Adopt a Code of Laws and Ordinances for the City of Johnson City, Tennessee, and to repeal all laws and ordinances in conflict therewith, and amendatory thereof by changing from RP2 planned residential zoning to R2B low-density residential zoning, a portion of certain property located along Boones Station Road, identified on tax map 36 as parcel number 2.02, is ready for your consideration on third and final reading. This is a change to the original plat to the Chestnut Cove subdivision, which is currently under construction. And if you'll recall, as they were laying out the lots on the ground, they realized that they needed to rezone a very small portion of RP2 property to R2B to allow a proper lot size to build a couple of single family structures. This is a very minor change, and we would recommend your approval.
Okay, good. We've already had public hearing on this one. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any other comments, questions? Ms. Jennings?
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Mayor Brock.
Yes.
The next order of business will be consideration of ordinance number 4737-20. An ordinance to amend the zoning map of the City of Johnson City, Tennessee, being part of the appendix to ordinance number 1519, entitled An Ordinance to Adopt the Code of Laws and Ordinances for the City of Johnson City, Tennessee, and to repeal all laws and ordinances in conflict therewith, and amendatory thereof by changing from RTP Research Technology Park zoning to B4 Planned Arterial Business zoning, certain property located along Christian Church Road, further identified on tax map 21 as parcel number 1. Ready for your consideration on third and final reading. This is the property currently owned by Ballard that was identified previously along Christian Church Road when we were discussing the Sharp Farm annexation, and we would recommend your approval.
And again, this is in the incentive zone that's being the state-sponsored incentive zone. Right.
Yes, ma'am. This is a rezoning of the entire parcel, and it is all within the incentive zone and would be eligible for incentives should the appropriate development take place on that property.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Move for approval.
Okay.
Or second.
Okay. Any other questions, discussion? Ms. Jennings?
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Mayor Brock.
Yes.
Mayor, this takes us to the section of our agenda dedicated to public input.
Correct. Ms. Graham, do we have anyone who's in the wait room for general input?
Not as of now, no.
Okay. Well, I officially should open the public input. As we do not have anyone who is in our chat room, I will close the public input.
And Commissioners, that brings us down to a section that for the city manager's report. I would like to recognize, as you all have earlier, the efforts of the staff in putting this year's budget together. It's been very challenging to find ways to close out the current fiscal year. We initially forecast a revenue shortfall of about $5 million in the current fiscal year, which we now have revised to be somewhere around $3 million. The entire staff's done a great job of reducing expenditures and finding ways to economize our service delivery. And as you have seen in the FY21 budget presentation, the staff's done a good job in putting that budget together. Along the lines of dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, we have called the majority of our employees back into the building for on-site work. We still have several employees who have health challenges or that live with folks that family members that have health challenges that will continue to do remote work and work from home. That's been a very effective and productive way of accomplishing a lot of work in ensuring the health and safety of our customer as well as our employees and their family members. Effective Monday morning, we will be opening up City Hall to traffic and to our customers, with the exception of the finance lobby. The finance lobby is currently under construction, and we expect that work to be completed in about 2 weeks. As everyone's aware, we have put in a new window down in the vestibule as you enter finance, to where people can do their business transactions, as well as we can continue to urge everyone to take advantage of our online payment or automatic bank draft for payments. And if you have inquiries or other needs for information, if you could call us, that works very well. We will continue to operate our finance window out in Gray, out on Suncrest Drive there at Fire Station number 8. So anyone that needs to pay a utility bill, tax bill, anything like that, that facility is open and it's very easy drive through, and we would encourage people to continue using that. Next Monday, as I said, we will open up City Hall. It will be part of the guidelines of the governor's task force. So we will have outlined one-way traffic as you enter and exit the building to prevent people from having to get in close proximity as they go in and out entrances and exits. There will be a requirement for a temperature check and the standard routine questions about their health and their to try to determine if everybody that's entering the building is healthy. We will be asking everyone that enters the building to wear a mask while they're in the building. And I want to emphasize this is for the safety of our customers as well as the people that work here. The CDC and the governor's task force are still recommending that social distancing, separation, and wearing of cloth mask is a proven effective way to slow down the spread of the virus. And we certainly want to maintain in compliance with all of the governor's guidelines and regulations and to do our part, continue to do our part to overcome the impact that this COVID-19 virus has had on the entire nation. Our community, our organization, and all of the citizens that live here have suffered. They've made great sacrifices, both personally, mentally, economically, to make the progress that we have to this point to enable us to begin reopening the economy and our normal way of life. And we want to ensure that we continue to follow those guidelines and to keep everybody safe so that we don't backtrack. We certainly don't want to be a part of the reason that there's a backslide in this thing. So we ask everyone to understand and to help us be responsible for ourselves and for each other to continue to get healthy here in Johnson City and Northeast Tennessee. There are a number of park facilities that are now open. As I understand, there were some new guidelines that came out very late this afternoon that's going to deal with large gatherings and I think restaurants. And we'll be examining those in the morning to see what further adjustments we can make to continue to open and further expand the use of our facilities. Again, strongly suggesting and reminding everyone, wash your hands frequently, don't touch your face, social distancing, wear the cloth mask. I think everybody that has paid any attention at all should have all that memorized by now, and we certainly appreciate everyone's cooperation and help. I will be supplying you a report probably sometime early next week that reflects our planning and zoning and building activity in the first quarter of this calendar year. And after initial review, I'm really pleased to report to you that subdivision development and new housing starts are up from last year. Now, I would remind you that that's for the first 3 months of the calendar year, so that got us through March. Be very interesting to see when we review that same information in July for the second quarter of the calendar year. But my conversations with multiple local builders and developers is that the demand for housing is very strong right now, and that housing is not staying on the market very long. I know currently we probably have somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 new subdivision lots under some stage of development. So I think that barring a downturn that we haven't seen yet, that industry and that part of our local economy has come through this in fairly decent shape. I've talked to a couple of builders and developers recently that have totally unsolicited mentioned the large number of inquiries and sales that they have made to people relocating here from large urban areas, driven primarily by the low tax rates and cost of living. And for the first time ever, we're hearing because it's a much healthier place to be than large urban areas. So as we have discussed previously, there's a silver lining in every cloud, and we need to take take advantage of the fact that we have an opportunity here to expand our local economy and grow new jobs and attract bright young minds to our area and folks to invest in our area by being able to afford them a place that has all of the amenities they're looking for, as well as a low-cost economy and a place that has pretty much avoided the brunt of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we will continue to try to position ourselves to grow the local economy by being attractive to those looking to relocate. Excuse me. On another note, I would certainly like to recognize the efforts of all of our citizens and our business owners, our city staff, and others, as we have come to grips with the communication and the demonstrations that have gone on in the last week, expressing a need for change. And I want to emphasize to everybody that we as a city are welcoming communication to those who want to voice their opinions and sit down with us and help us better understand their opinions and to work with us to develop a plan for change. We're going into these discussions without a predetermined outcome, because you really can't go into a discussion and a communication with someone if you already think you know how you want it to end up. We're really going into these conversations open-minded and with a desire to learn more so that we can make Johnson City an even better place than it already is. And there are a number of local people who have been very good to communicate with us and to set up meetings and to begin to work with us to help everyone better understand everyone's position. So we certainly want to thank them and welcome them to help us all work together as a community to better ourselves. And so there have been some disruptions over the last week, and those are very unfortunate that things rose to that level. But I can assure everyone that our law enforcement officials and employees here in Johnson City go through an extremely rigorous process of screening and interviews and continual training to learn how to deal with civility and communications and civil rights and use of force and all of those things. This is something this organization has done for 15 years. We have been an accredited law enforcement agency for more than 15 years. And in order to maintain our accreditation, we have to meet certain standards. And there are hundreds of different metrics that are measured and reviewed on an annual basis. And on, I think it's every third year, there are a group of accreditation folks that come in here from outside our organization that review our documentation and review our policies and procedures to ensure that we're in compliance with all state and federal laws and to help us rise to a level of compliance beyond what is required. So we look forward to sharing that information with our community over the next day or two. This is something that we have taken seriously for decades. We will continue to take it very seriously that everybody be treated the same in a civil and respectful way, and that we ensure that the law enforcement activities are monitored. And we're very proud of the fact that we have very few complaints and that we have had very few problems in terms of excessive use of force and those types of things. So we're anxious to learn more from our community, and we're very proud of the folks that we have and the way that we have conducted ourselves here in Johnson City in our interactions with the community. So thanks to those who have communicated with us, and we look forward to further communications with our community. Mayor, you're muted.
There we go. How about that? Just a couple of real quick comments I'll make as well. You know, we've had multiple groups in the community who it's almost some of the pop-up marches that have been going on, but there's been a real effort to bring those groups together so there's a little more cohesion and planning that's going on. And I think that's going to be a good thing, and maybe doing things in ways that may not necessarily require March every night, that they have more forums and discussions, that kind of thing. We're also getting feedback from our downtown businesses, you know, who have been through, you know, the COVID shutdown. And so they're just barely hanging on by a shoestring. And so a lot of the marches, you know, have kept customers away from them. So there's a real sensitivity to that. And we have an excellent relationship with the group who are trying to pull everything together. And we've communicated this as well. So I think they're going to be real sensitive to that. These are our citizens. Now we do know, and Pete, you may want to comment on this, that we've had outside groups coming in, and those generally are the troublemakers, you know, that we're seeing. But these young folks who are, you know, wanting to have this dialogue, and they're very eager to sit down with the city, and they're extremely happy that we're willing to do that in the kind of way that we're looking at. But these are our future leaders, and this is a wonderful opportunity for us to be able to work with them and to help show them mechanisms by which change can be made. And so it's been a real enrichment for me personally to get to know a lot of them. I've told people my new best friends are 17 and 18 years old, but they're really amazing young men and women. So I'm real eager, and I know we're going to make some real progress. I hope we will be a role model community. You know, this is going on in almost every city across the nation, and I hope we will be a real role model on how we can move through this in a way that all of our citizens can be empowered to, you know, achieve their full potential. So that's it.
Mayor, if I may, we had someone call in right at the beginning of the city manager's report. I don't know if you want to allow it back in.
Sure. Was it just for general input?
I think so.
Are they still on the line?
Yes, they've held this whole time.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay. I will reopen the public input and ask the person on hold to state their name and address and the topic, and you will have 3 minutes to give input to the commissioners and the city.
Sure. Was it just for general input?
Yeah.
Yes.
Are they still on the line?
Yes, they've held this whole time. If I can ask whoever's on the line to mute the background audio.
Ask the person on hold to state their name and address and the topic, and you will have 3 minutes to give input to the commissioners and the city.
Hi.
Sure. Is it just for general input?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Are they still on the line?
Yes, they've held this whole time. If I can ask whoever's on the line to mute the background audio.
Okay, I'm not sure how this is working because I'm on a phone and watching on Zoom.
Please only respond to the voice on the phone, please.
Okay. Hi.
And if you can turn your volume down on your computer or your TV, that would be great.
Sure. Gotcha. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know what the process is here. I've
Just,
waited it out on my phone while watching on Zoom.
Yeah, state your name and address, please.
My name is Rob Martindale. I live at 810 West Maple Street, Johnson City, Tennessee.
Okay, we can hear you now.
Gotcha. Thank you. I think I tried to contact all the city commissioners. A neighbor of mine contacted me last night about a pledge or petition that mayors all over the country have been signing or agreeing to about some general reforms or overviews of police actions. And I just wanted them to get a chance to look at that, go over it, and maybe contemplate our city also signing it. The man who came up to me, his name is Kipalolia. I'm sure he will not mind me saying that. Kip is African. His wife is white. And when they were coming back from downtown, some people, I'm just basically flying Confederate flags, trucks, I guess, coming in outside, people like Ms. Brock said earlier, and Mayor Brock said earlier. And they yelled some things to him, and I think it really hurt them. And Kip is a very calm, deliberate man, and he thought this would be something that we could do, some kind of positive action. So I just suggest that you look at that pledge, that thing. It's on obama.org. It's not political. It is just something that a lot of cities have mayors. And I know we are a mayor government, but we are strong in our city commission. So it's just not like the mayor makes a final call. And just look at that and contemplate it and see if that's something that you might think would be signed. It's an online signature, and then they put it out there. That's about it. That's all I wanted to give you.
Thank you, Mr. Martindale. We appreciate you calling in, and I have heard about it earlier today for the first time. And so, Mr. Peterson, maybe you could find that petition that's being signed by mayors and have Chief read it as well, and then we can move that forward. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Is that the end of, I will close the public hearing if there's no one else there.
No, there's not.
Okay, commissioners, anybody? So Commissioner Fowler, you're in Arkansas right now. I think the broadband link when it crosses the Mississippi must be slowing down a little bit. We've had a little lag.
Yeah, I'm sure no one has ever attended a city commission meeting from as far away as I'm attending tonight, and that might be part of the problem. But and well, I also had a huge thunderstorm come through like you did just a little while ago, which knocked me out of here for a little bit. But I'm hoping everything stays calm in Johnson City while I'm gone. I'm going to a wedding Saturday, one of my best friends from high school. And so got here safely, and looking forward to spending some time with my family. I'm here at my brother's house, and it looks like I'm at the beach, but he just put up a background for me for this meeting tonight. So
I've been wondering that. I've been looking at it. Commissioner Calhoun, any final comments?
Well, I know that all of us have been getting a lot of comments and questions and suggestions, and certainly we're going to make sure that all those are shared with the appropriate people in the city. And I think we've all talked to a lot of people, a number of people over the last few days. And I just have to say that the large majority, not all, but the large majority wanted to communicate to me as a commissioner how proud they were of the citizens of Johnson City and how our city has handled things, including and how proud they are of the police and how they've handled things. And certainly they're appreciative of you and of Chief and the involvement there. And the message has been, there are things that we can do, just as Mr. Peterson has said, and listening is the first step, but we got lots of things that we can investigate. And I've gotten a lot of suggestions that we're going to share. However, the message was clear to me is that most of these people are just really happy they live in Johnson City, Tennessee, and how proud they are of how our city has handled this situation. I know it's made me proud too.
Thank you, Commissioner Calhoun. And I think one of the things as I've watched our officers out in the streets and been there, it's a stressful environment. There's no two ways about it. And again, we kind of go back to one of our first items on the list, and we're not giving any raises this year. So I look at their sacrifice that they make, and they do it because they love the work that they do, and they're so committed to protecting our community. So, you know, we are hopeful that because we are going to listen and try to guide this in a very positive way, that those who feel the need to protest, which is to get people's attention, and they definitely have our attention, that we can change from that mode to a mode of progress. And so that's certainly where we want to take this. But thank y'all all, and Mr. Peterson, and you might even mention this as you were mentioning the virus. And here's one final thing. Obviously, with things opening up, and there has been a lot of concern because so many people have been together marching in the streets. I've been really proud of about, I don't know, 60 or 70% who have been wearing masks during that time, but we've had a lot who haven't. And then we've had the little spike over in Unicoi County. So we can't let our guard down. And as we particularly get into bigger groups, we have to be very, very cognizant of that and make sure that we take care of ourselves, which if we take care of ourselves, we'll be taking care of other people we're around. But thank y'all a lot. And if there's nothing else, this meeting is adjourned.